projects to be done, it would have reallocated those funds in order to address the impending issue of COVID-19. This government would have done all that was necessary to ensure that it invested in the security and protection of the country's welfare, i.e. the human resource of the people, as well as the businesses in this country. The leader of government business yesterday in his presentation would have given you an exhaustive list of everything that this government would have done, that this government would have created. From the vaccine program, which in itself is a big chunk of resources, to the BEST program, to providing packages for those households who are unable to work at this time, or who are unable to work at that time. This government spent money in numerous places, addressed numerous issues. None of it was planned. This government had to operate in a proactive manner and deal with new issues as they presented themselves so that this country did not go down under. Now we are approaching a financial year, the next financial year, 2021 to 2022. COVID-19 is still here. We are still in a pandemic. New and different strains are being discovered every other month. There's a different article about this strain, about that strain. Some fake news, some real. The point is that there's a lot of information now about COVID. COVID is the talk of the town. So we are operating in unfamiliar territory. This is not business as usual. And therefore, any appropriation bill to be tabled cannot be seen as business as usual. We are in some uncertain times. And if any of the bigger countries are any indicator, as we've seen time and time again, countries have made tremendous lengths towards combating COVID-19. And when they have reached a significant point of progress, we have seen a new wave emerge as it relates to the spread within the community. And they've seen all of what they have done eroded back to square one. So this is some uncertain times. No one can predict what will happen going forward as it relates to COVID-19. Now, given that backdrop, notwithstanding all of the global and local issues that this country has had to deal with, this government was still able to table a bill that will not only ensure that there's development in this country through different capital works projects, and other projects, but it will also ensure that this country can continue to operate and function in a respectable way. Mr. President, the Ministry of Housing and Lands and Maintenance, that ministry has stepped up to the plate as it relates to our fight against COVID. As you are aware, COVID has seen an increase in unemployment in this country, a significant increase and a halt to doing business. The Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance has made it their mission for the next financial year that notwithstanding all that is happening in the world, notwithstanding COVID, it will attempt a feat that it has not attempted in years previously. It is attempting to complete 100% of the capital works project within the next 12 months in the financial year. So what does that mean? Firstly, it means it's an ambitious task. And they should be commended for it because they recognize the seriousness of the nature of this country at this point in time. Now, over the next 12 months, through the Ministry of Housing, this country will see a number of construction projects being rolled out. These projects will both have social and economic impact, positive impacts for this country. Because on the one hand, as I indicated, there is a need for jobs. And on the other, there's still that core ideology that Bajans have of a wanting to have affordable housing. So these projects are twofold. These projects will ensure that there's jobs available for persons within the construction industry. And once the construction projects have come to an end, the end product of some of those projects will result in homes being available. And not just any home, affordable homes, comfortable homes will be available for our Barbadian public. These projects will be conducted across the island. Some of the areas that I've highlighted is Applewaite, St. Thomas, Todd, St. Philip, White Park Road, St. Michael, Parish Land in Christchurch, Vespera Gardens in St. James, and Chancery Lane in Christchurch. Mr. President, I believe that it is a dream of almost every Barbadian to own a piece of the rock. But the reality is that the rock is just too expensive. The reality is that the average Barbadian simply cannot afford to purchase a piece of the rock. I believe that the majority of people in this country may agree with me, Mr. President. And the ministry is well aware of that. In fact, during this financial year, the ministry would have received about 370 applications for rental units and 29 applications for the rental of land. There's no doubt in my mind by that indicator alone that there is indeed a demand for affordable housing in this country. And this government intends to address it. Now, Mr. President, I've seen the artist's impression, the rendition, as some of the technical people will call it, for some of these 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom houses that are intended to be constructed over the next 12 months. And I must tell you, Mr. President, I am impressed with what I've seen. These houses are modern. The design is of the 21st century. The houses have enough square footage and surrounding greenery as it relates to the development that persons will feel a respectable level of comfort and a sense of pride in owning one of those houses from the project. Mr. President, I believe that this government should be commended for the ambitious effort that the Ministry of Housing is about to embark on, given the fact that we are in the midst of a pandemic. While other countries might be allocating resources to do other things other than find housing for their people, we are doing it simultaneously, both protecting our health service as well as providing housing. And that is in the midst of a pandemic, Mr. President, and we should be commended for that. Now, while this government is building homes, it is also rejuvenating the existing infrastructure that is owned by the Crown properties. And there's a reason for that. As a matter of fact, there's a common sense reason for that. But why would I have properties dilapidated, abandoned, costing me money, even when it is not inhabited, when I can allocate resources to those said properties, repurpose them if necessary, but definitely refurbish them, and be able to relocate some of the other departments within the public service to these new refurbished properties so as to help me reduce my expenses? I think that is a common sense approach. But if I'm paying $10,000 at a building that will cost me $20,000 to repair an old building, the long-term gain that I would reap from renovating, from spending the upfront cost in renovating the building, will save me in the long term. And that is exactly what is the intention of the rejuvenating project of the Crown properties. So some of these properties that the government intends to refurbish include, there are actually 9 properties over the next financial year the government intends to refurbish. But I will highlight some of them. The Sanitation Service Authority building. I myself always ask, what's going on at that building? It just seems to be a lovely, big, well-constructed building on the outside. But the reality is that there were some issues with it internally, issues relating to carpeting, etc. This government has decided that they will address that issue, remove the carpeting, so as to make the building inhabitable. And we'll be able to relocate public service departments into that said building and help hopefully reduce our rental expense. Some of the other buildings include the Gatehouse building, which is the old Barbados Water Authority headquarters, the Welfare building, School Meals building, Boycott building, and many others. Now, once the restoration project for these have been completed, as I indicated, the government departments will be able to occupy them. As it stands, I understand the annual average government bill for rent, the expenditure of rent, is about $65 million a year. $65 million a year. So I don't think there's anyone who wouldn't want to see a drastic reduction in an expense like that. So again, it is commendable that the Ministry of Housing is embarking on this project to assist this government in being more financially prudent with its spending. Mr. President, this government will also address the National Housing Corporation sewage wells issue. As you're aware, on more than one occasion, the sewage wells would have been a national topic of discussion. This government would have made it its business to hear the cries of the people as it relates to the lack of maintenance or erosion of some of those wells. And as a result of that, Mr. President, this government has allocated approximately $2 million towards the refurbishment of all of the National Housing Corporation sewage wells. That will directly deal with those issues, Mr. President. And for that, again, I submit that the government should be commended for it, because they've heard the cries, and rather than ignore it, they've found the money to address an issue that has been pressing for a while in relation to persons living in the housing area. Funds have also been allocated towards the land registry. Now, for years, persons have been having issues with the land registry as it relates to the way in which business is conducted there. It is outdated. It needs to be brought to the 21st century. It needs to utilize more information technology and update their databases and systems so that persons will be better able to access the records of the land registry. Those are issues that have been plaguing the land registry for years. So I'm proud to say, Mr. President, that in the next financial year, money has been allocated to assist the land registry in addressing those issues. The land registry will now be able to acquire a system that they've referred to as the land administration system. The vision is, Mr. President, that with the implementation of this system, the land registry will now be able to be rapid, safe, reliable, and provide high quality service to its customers. That's not to say it has not been doing that, but it has been doing that under circumstances of an outdated system. So with the implementation of this new system, Mr. President, we would now see ourselves transforming the land registry towards now more of a world-class land registry depository, documents depository. This system, Mr. President, will have various features. It will allow for the land registry to have a website. It will be able to make information now readily available to users of the website, customers. The records will now be digitized, Mr. President, and as this government has indicated from the outset in its manifesto that the plan is to make Barbados a digital unit, a digital hub, some place where all of our documents will now become paperless. This is one of the mechanisms that will be done to assist in achieving our goal. Persons will now be able to pay online. Now, I believe that everyone would agree with me, Mr. President, that on some occasions, persons find it increasingly hard to give government money that is due to government. So with the advent of this system, Mr. President, there would no longer be any excuse as to why you don't want to go wait in a long line. There would be no longer any issues of the time that it takes to get money out of your pocket into the government's hand, because now you'll be able to use, I assume, the Easy Pay system, and you'll be able to make payments directly from your home towards the land registry. Ease of doing business. Mr. President, the land administration system has a number of features, but I just only want to highlight a few of them that will be implemented going forward into the next financial year. Now, while it sounds good to purchase this software, there's a lot of background work that has to be done to ensure that when this software is implemented, we are not thrown back to square one. Let me give you an example, Mr. President. You would go and you would purchase this system and notice that the computers that you currently have are not capable of processing the power of the system. What that results in is a wastage of time, because now we have to go and acquire new systems to accommodate, new computers and software to accommodate the new land administration system. So the Ministry of Housing has been proactive in its approach to the implementation of this new system, because rather than taking a wait and see approach, what it has done is identified the areas that need to be addressed so that once this system comes in, everything will be started. So for example, they have upgraded their hardware. They recently purchased a hardware. I'm not too familiar with the technical terms, so I would just refer to it as a hardware. A piece of hardware that would assist them in processing the software from the land administration system. And now because of COVID, and COVID has taught us that we can be more flexible within the workplace, it has been discovered that everyone doesn't have to work for the land registry. Persons can therefore work from home or off-site. So they've upgraded the laptops at the land registry that the public officers will be using, so that not only would it be able to process the same land admin system, but they would also be able to do business with its customers while not necessarily being on site at the land registry. All in all, Mr. President, the ministry is taking all of the necessary steps now, so that by the time the next financial year rolls in, there will be no challenges as it relates, with no foreseeable challenges as it relates to the implementation of the new land administration system. Mr. President, exciting developments are in store for the land registry. And with these new features, once they've been implemented, not only will Barbados benefit from the system, Mr. President, but also the international market. Persons will no longer have to fly here to conduct a conveyance. As I understand it, one of the features, which whenever it rolls, it may not roll in the next financial year, but eventually it will happen, we will have the capacity now to do e-conveyancing. And that is something that I know that a lot of business people will be looking forward to. It is definitely one of the earmarks for the land administration system that once it is implemented, a lot more business will be done as it relates to the movement of title in this country, transfer of title in this country. Now, Mr. President, there's one other ministry that I want to address before I close my submissions on this appropriation bill, Mr. President, and that is the Office of the Attorney General. There's only a few things in there, Mr. President, I wanted to highlight. For starters, Mr. President, it should be known that this government would have indicated that it wanted to improve the judicial system. In this current financial year and the previous one, funds would have been allocated towards the increasing of the judges, the increasing of the law courts. One of the ultimate side effects of that would be an increase in work in the said courts, and therefore they would need more personnel to be able to manage the workload. And as a result of that, as it relates to the Director of Public Prosecution's Office, we've seen an increase of 4 new prosecutors within the court system. So I understand that we now have approximately 10 prosecutors operating at any given time within our court system, our criminal court system. That is indeed a major improvement for Barbados. Because I know time and time again, persons have been indicating that the judicial wheels take too long to turn. So slowly but surely, as Barbados can see, as each financial year rolls around, this government is adding a bit more and a bit more towards the ultimate goal, which is to have a 21st century judicial system in full operation, where we can see the reduction in our backlog of the criminal cases, as well as maintaining consistent judicial caseloads, current judicial caseloads. Now, there's one other thing here, Mr. President, under the Office of the Attorney General that it would be remiss of me not to address, and it is not necessarily as it relates to expenditure or revenue, but it's more about the benefit that Barbadians will have once this department is fully operational. And that department is the Forensic Science Department, the Forensic Center. And Mr. President, as you're aware, money would have been allocated to the refurbishment of this center from the time this government came into office. Money was spent to eliminate the environmental issues, upgrade the existing equipment, and add new additional equipment. Now, COVID obviously would have put a halt to the works that was going on at this center. But the understanding is, Mr. President, that as soon as time permits, as COVID permits, rather, this center should be up and running within the next financial year. Now, what does that mean for Barbados? Because I read an article recently, when it's probably 2018 or 17, where Barbados had an embarrassing moment where I think it was coroner's court. Someone had died, and the scientific team was unable to provide evidence as it related to certain aspects of the case because of an underperforming forensic center. That should never be the case in a country like Barbados, that punches above its weight, that does what it needs to be done to ensure that it is competitive at all times. This center, Mr. President, will now be able to conduct a number of services. We will now be able to see DNA testing. We will now be able to see pathology testing. Toxicology, and a number of other forensic services that they'll be offering. So the Barbados Police Force will benefit from it. The hospitals will benefit from it. The private and public medical institutions, as it relates to toxicology reports, will also be able to benefit from it. That is much needed revenue that this country can get once we have that center up and running, hopefully within the next financial year. It is indeed an asset to this country, because we may also be even able to ascertain work and provide services to countries outside of our jurisdiction, because this is indeed one of the better forensic labs probably within the Caribbean. Now, in relation to the Police Complaints Authority, this is the authority that's responsible for persons who make complaints as it relates to police officers. Now, I for one believe in checks and balances. And the Police Complaints Authority is a department that is there to ensure that if a complaint is made against a police officer, that it is addressed, investigated, and a report provided on it. Now, what has happened in the past is that the Royal Barbados Police Force would normally receive the complaint either from the complaints office or from the police complaints authority, and they would then investigate the matter, provide a report, and if necessary, the complaints authority can further investigate that said report should they disagree or find further information wanting within the said report. Even though the police complaints authority has discretion under the Act to be able to do their own direct investigations, the reality is that not all matters will be suited for them to do the direct investigation. It will be matters that will specifically need the facilitation of the Royal Barbados Police Force. Now, statistics show that notwithstanding that complaints are being made to the Police Complaints Authority, there has been a habit of these matters taking an inordinate long time to be resolved. This is a serious issue. Why is it? Because police officers have an authority to deal with public order, to arrest, to question, to interview. The citizens of Barbados are relying on the police to do what is necessary, what is right. Having said that, the reality is that not every institution or organization will have persons that operate to the letter of the law. Some people might wave a little too far. Some people might push the envelope a little too far down the road. The reality is a complaint can be raised based on how you feel you have been addressed by an officer. And in those circumstances, it is important that we as the Police Complaints Authority investigates these matters and have these matters resolved in quick time, because it institutes confidence from the public in the investigations of police officers. It is needed, and it is something that should be revisited as it relates to the Police Complaints Authority. My understanding is that there's been a memorandum of understanding that has been developed between the Royal Barbados Police Force and the Police Complaints Authority, where now the Royal Barbados Police Force will allow, or rather facilitate, access to certain police records and files so as to help the Police Complaints Authority be able to do their job rather than having to wait on the police to provide a report. And let me be fair, because I don't want to sound as though I'm bashing on the police. The reality is that the police are overworked as well. They have limited resources and have to deal with pressing issues every day. But having said that, the complaints of our citizens is equally important, and we need to be able to address those just as fast and just as efficient as we deal with other pending criminal matters. So in the next financial year, it is hopeful that we'll be able to see more collaboration between the Police Complaints Authority and the Royal Barbados Police Force, and hopefully we'll be able to see a reduction in the number of complaints that are outstanding. I was trying to locate the statistic here to give an example of the current status of complaints that have not been resolved as yet. Gravely indulgent, Mr. President. Report stemming as far back as 2017, Mr. President. I see here over 20 complaints since 2017 have not been resolved. 2017 is way too far behind. Each of these individuals that have made complaints, be it valid or frivolous, they need to have some resolution to it, because this is part and parcel towards keeping law and order in this country. Now, Mr. President, I would have touched on the Ministry of Housing as it relates to the projects that they're seeking to achieve in the next 12 months in the next financial year. And I've also highlighted one or two things that touch me personally as it relates to the Attorney General's office. But the underlying principle from it all, Mr. President, is that in this next financial year, things are still going to be done in this country. This government has not put its hands up and indicate that we spent too much money in 2020, so right now we got to put on a vice grip. That is not the situation here, Mr. President. We are continuously finding creative ways to be able to get business done in this country. So as long as COVID permits, so as long as we are able to continue to combat COVID, and the health service officials are able to help us in our fight against COVID, Barbados will continue to be striving towards excellence in this country. And with those few words, Mr. President, I'm blessed.
Thank you very much, Senator Sands. Senator Dr. Rogers. Senator Reverend Dr. Rogers.
Good morning, Mr. President and fellow members of this honorable chamber. It is indeed a pleasure to be speaking at this time on this Appropriation Bill 2021-2022. I continue to reiterate that it is indeed a pleasure to be sharing with such a talented group in the leadership of this country, charged with the responsibility of building up on the work of those who have gone before in sculpting the national ethos on the continuum towards self-actualization as a people here. Before I go into my presentation proper, I wish to especially commend the Honorable Prime Minister and the members of her cabinet and the other members of the team for the work they have been doing during this COVID-19 pandemic in seeking to keep our country safe. I wish to, it is good to sit in our armchairs at home and criticize and say what should be done and what shouldn't be done. But it is only when you're sitting in the seat that you realize how difficult a task it is, and I think they've done an extremely good job thus far. Doesn't mean there haven't been some mistakes, and I'm sure that they're willing to admit that as well. But it has been a good job. I also wish to especially thank the health workers of this country for what they continue to do, for the service they continue to render to the people of this land. I don't have a constituency, but I wish to especially shout out my neighbors at the Glebe Polyclinic.
That's your constituency.
Sister Granham and the entire team there at the Polyclinic, who I have just seen working tirelessly to ensure that our people are vaccinated, to ensure that our people are taken care of. And, I see it firsthand from my window. And I really wish to thank them for all that they've been doing. I wish to preface my comments on this appropriation bill with some words I'm sure I've uttered here before, but I think are still as relevant now as when I would have uttered them before. The words of Brutus in that epic work, Julius Caesar, by Shakespeare, that reminds us that we have a great opportunity ahead of us. There's a tide in the affairs of men, which when taken at the flood leads to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our ventures. I still believe that this is a great opportunity for us in Barbados and this region to build out better, as has been the buzz phrase throughout the world, after this pandemic. But before we do that, there's some things that we need to do internally. And so I will theme my message, telling the untold stories. I've prefaced my work with those words from Brutus to remind us of the opportunity that is before us. But as I prepared this message for this debate, I could not help but consider how apposite it is that we're discussing this appropriation bill at this time. And what do I mean by this time? I mean this very present time, these days that we've chosen to reflect upon it. Yesterday, the 24th of March, we observed within the church the feast of Oscar Romero. For those of a particular vintage who knew the history of Central America in the late 70s and 1980s, would know the name Oscar Romero and what it represents. Yesterday, the 24th of March, would have been the 41st anniversary of his assassination while he celebrated Mass. But Oscar Romero was one who championed the cause of justice and equality, who fought against oppression in his native San Salvador. He challenged the powers of this world. He challenged the military might that was being used by his leaders. And on the day before he died, quite similar to Martin Luther King Jr. on the night before he died, Oscar Romero said, "A bishop will die, but the church and its people will never perish." He understood the situation he faced. Today, the 25th of March, is observed as the Feast of the Annunciation within the church. The Feast of the Annunciation recounts that visit by the angel Gabriel to the Blessed Virgin Mary, telling her that she'll be the mother of our Lord. It comes 3 months before June 24th, which is the Feast of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist, because we're told that Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother, was 6 months pregnant when Mary got the message. And 9 months before December 25th, which we observe as the Feast of the Nativity of our Lord, just to show how the church keeps liturgical time. But I've highlighted it to make the point that one of the pressing messages that the angel Gabriel gave to Mary at the time is one that we could well hold on to. With God, nothing will be impossible. With God, nothing will be impossible. Today, Mr. President, also marks an observance within the secular world that we've been observing since 2007, the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. I've highlighted these three observances because in some way, they can inform us about our current circumstances. And I believe that they crave our indulgence to discuss this bill before us within their light. This is an occasion for us, Mr. President, as a country, to dream big, to see ourselves as world leaders, to see ourselves where perhaps 10 years ago we never thought we could be. And why do I say this when we're going through such economic challenges? Because what this pandemic has shown us is not only our personal weakness, but the vulnerability of the world. And just as there are other nations out there that consider themselves great, that are going through the harrows of this pandemic, we too can consider ourselves great and build back better after this pandemic. Mr. President, but the dreams we have for this country, the dreams of our future that we have the privilege to shape, must be realized first when we formulate them as a collective and not as separate and distinct groups in this country. And hence, sir, there's a fourth reason for which today is very apt for this discussion. We are in the season of Lent. The season of Lent is a time for reflection and introspection. The season of Lent is a time for bearing the soul. It is time for us to bear our national soul. It is time for us to tear open those wounds that we have patched and covered up, and debride them so that true healing can take place and true development as a cohesive people. So that we can not only dream about this nation that we wish to see, but together as Barbadians build it. I have said we must tell the untold stories. What I'm saying here is nothing new within the context of this debate. As I listened yesterday, some of the speakers have already been articulating this very view. It was quite refreshing to hear the speech by the Honorable Minister of Tourism and International Transport last evening, which had the recurring theme, it's no us versus them. There's no us versus them, which spoke to the cohesion that is imperative if we are to realize our goals beyond this pandemic. Thus, perhaps, I should use this as a jump-off point to congratulate the Honorable Minister on delivering her first speech on the Appropriations Bill as Minister of Tourism, and the innovative ideas she would have articulated and brought to the fore in the quest to keep afloat an industry that she herself has admitted may be in free fall. However, try we must, as we recognize its importance to national development in the future. While rightfully we seek to diversify our economy and pivot away somewhat from our overdependence on tourism, it certainly cannot be lost on us that the Barbadian economy will not be automatically diversified with just the stroke of a pen or some element of immediacy. It means, Mr. President, that tourism will be for some time in this future our mainstay. To this end, we must fine-tune not only our product, as the minister pointed out yesterday, but we must also look at the inner workings that drive the industry. I was tempted to use another word, Mr. President. I was tempted to use the term machinations, but I opted not to. However, given the statistics of the ownership of our hotel room capacity, divulged by Senator Drakes yesterday, where she noted that 47% of our room capacity is in the hands of a mere few, 8 entities, all of a particular racial profile, and I'm using her assessment here. Some may find the term machinations quite appropriate. I still don't, sir. What I do believe, though, is that this is an untold story that must be told. It must be analyzed. It must be addressed. If it is a matter of inequality in availability of resources, measures must be taken to correct this imbalance. If it is a matter of inequity, that is damning and must be immediately dealt with. However, I believe, sir, that the personnel we have at the forefront of our tourism industry at this point in time have all the skills, have the ideas necessary to make this product better for us in the future, to serve this country better as we go forward. In the area of transport, I wish to commend the minister and his team for the new fleet of buses that we've received, the electric buses. They are aesthetically pleasing. They are lovely to watch on the road. It is good to see 47 There are 47 of them. There are 47 new buses. Thank you very much, Doctor. And counting. And they speak to the care that our government has for our people. For the first time, some of our people can drive comfortably on public transport with air-conditioned comfort and Wi-Fi. That's important too these days. So I wish to congratulate the minister and his team for all that they've done thus far, even in the midst of the trying times that we're experiencing. There's an area, Mr. President, that I believe is of utmost importance to us, and that is the area of energy. In Barbados, we have been pioneers in the field of solar water heating in this region. And that pioneering work came out of a crisis. Out of the oil crisis of the 1970s, I believe the story goes that it was the now Canon Hatch who set up an oil drum on his house and started experimenting with solar water heating. And out of that emerged entrepreneurs like James Husbands and others who put Barbados on the map in terms of its solar water heating capacity, saving this country to the tune of $11.5 million, I understand, per year. Now is a time when we need that type of innovation again. I know that we have embarked on the ambitious program of going totally renewable energy by 2030. I believe it is achievable, but it requires us as Barbadians to grasp the opportunities that are before us and to embrace this new initiative so that we can be energy independent. And in that way, I believe we can save millions, even if not billions of dollars for ourselves, while earning something from our investment as well. And so I want to encourage Barbadians. Let us look back at our past. Let us look back at the pioneers of the 1970s. Let us look at the great minds that we've had amongst us. Professor Oliver Headley comes to mind at this time. One of the most brilliant minds that ever walked this land. And I can remember being at university and seeing Professor Headley working on all these little experiments on solar energy. But at that time, there was no funding to come. At that time, we were not thinking in the way we're thinking now. It was Professor Headley who built the solar freezer at Skeets Bay. This is how advanced we were as a people. But somehow, just like the Egyptians, when Moses was leading them into the wilderness, they longed for the flesh pots of Egypt, not realizing that the manna that they were receiving was something better than that. And so we have backpedaled a bit in that regard. But I believe we still have the ability and the expertise to put Barbados at the forefront of the renewable energy thrust in this world. And here I'm going to advocate something that in another territory will be called socialism, but I believe it's given back in Barbadian parlance. There are many of us, and I say us, who have been trained at the University of the West Indies in the field of natural sciences. And we do not use those degrees anymore, but the government paid for them. I believe we should all be made to give back some time, something to this nation to assist in the national development of this country. That brings me to the area of education and culture, Mr. President. I have joined these two together because I believe that they speak to each other. But before I embark on my exposition on this matter, I wish to first applaud the Ministry of Education and all involved for their response during this pandemic. It has not been easy. I am the parent of a 13-year-old who sits in front of the computer every day. And as a former teacher, I am so glad this pandemic didn't come when I was teaching. It must be extremely difficult to instruct children via these virtual platforms, and it is. And I want to especially thank all the teachers, all the persons involved in the ministry, the students and their parents, for the effort they've been making just to make things work. I do not wish to rehash what Dr. Springer articulated so well yesterday when he spoke about the challenges that persons are facing. But I believe that there are some matters coming out of the past year that will need to be addressed once we get to the end of this pandemic, but even now. One that comes to mind is the possible mental stress of the last year, not only on teachers, but on those students who sat CSEC and particularly CAPE, especially those who were in their final year of CAPE and were on track for scholarships, only to find that their hopes were dashed because somewhere midstream the criteria was changed. I believe when all of this is finished, we will have to look very seriously at how we address that problem with those students, especially those whose ticket out of poverty was predicated on their performance in those examinations. I believe that I see that the government has allocated funds for developmental scholarships and so on. And I believe that this is a time where we have to look at continuous assessment and speak to the teachers about those students that would have been on scholarship roll only to have their hopes dashed. But that's a matter for the technocrats to deal with. And while I'm not preempting future events, Mr. President, I am sure that we have all been privy to the recent murmurings regarding the possible increase of fees at the University of the West Indies. That will have an impact on our students and our future development as well. Of course, I am one that is very committed to the pushing of technical vocational education and training. I believe that a lot more effort, in spite of all that has been done, must be placed there, not only to enhance the programs offered, but also to deal with the stigma of how technical vocational education and training has been traditionally viewed within our context. However, Mr. President, my substantive point under this head of education and culture has to do with the proposed expansion of the cultural industry, for example, with the renaming and repurposing of Queen's Park, and as Dr. Springer pointed out yesterday, the proposed beefing up of the history curriculum in our schools. These are highly commendable initiatives, which should be welcomed by any progressive-minded Barbadian. However, Senator Drake's disclosure that some artists feel marginalized because of favoritism calls for us to examine these untold stories as well. I'm just using Senator Drake's term. A person's ability to find work through the channels of government in Barbados ought not to be predicated on whether they did the party jingle for the last election or not, or what color shirt they choose to wear. Remember, there is no us versus them. Of course, I know that there are some people who have the ability to mix colors very well, as I heard the Honorable Prime Minister complimented the Leader of Opposition in the other place about his burgundy suit. And burgundy is supposed to be a mixture of blue and red, with more red than blue. But I believe it is time for us, as we move into the 21st century, and to build our country back better, to seriously let go of those things that prevent ordinary Barbadians from sharing in the development of the state. I have said it before that parties exist to engage in elections. They exist to convince people that the other side is not worth voting for. But once they take the reins of government, their duty is to all people. Where Dr. Springer's proposal of introduction of history in our schools is concerned, I commend that move 100%. But I will say it is time for us to teach our true history. Who we are as Barbadians, who we are as West Indians, and I don't use that term West Indian much because it doesn't exist on the map, who we are as Caribbean people. It is time to tell the untold stories so that we embrace our true identity. On this International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, there are some untold stories there that must be unearthed. I got into trouble a few nights ago on a webinar because I made the point that while we advocate for reparations from Europe, let us not forget that Africa was a willing participant in the slave trade as well. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but that's the reality. And until we deal with that untold story, until we are able to debride that wound, we will not truly embrace our identity, who we truly are as Caribbean people. Because every February we'll dress our children up in pretty clothes that were probably made in India, sold by a Syrian here, and think that we've done something great. There needs to be a deeper analysis of who we are so that we embrace our true identity. What do I mean by that? In this country, there are some of us who identify as Negro. There are others who identify as Caucasian. But the reality is that those are just phenotypic. Those are just at the surface of skin. If we were to truly analyze ourselves as a people genotypically, we are a hybrid. And so when we talk about our identity, do not simply tell me I'm African, because I'm not going to deny my European ancestry, because it's a part of me. And I believe that there are some conversations that need to be had around some tables in this country to remind some people who identify as Caucasian, well, not remind them, but tell them, because I believe it has never been told, about who they really are and who some of their ancestors are. If we were to do that, we would not have the type of rant that went around on social media sometime about sending people back to Africa. Because if we were to truly analyze it, most of the people of that particular hue of the speaker would have had to go back to Africa as well. It's just the reality of who we are. And until we embrace that and teach our children that, we will not embrace our true identity. We must be able to tell them of the harrowing stories of how young girls were taken out of their quarters at night for the pleasure of the planter and his friends. But we must also be able to tell them the stories of forbidden love. That there were instances of genuine love between people who were Caucasian and Negro, and we are their descendants. Part of my ancestry is Francophone, from the little island of Marie-Galante. And I remember in England a few years ago meeting up some Nigerian friends, and one of them said to me, "You are Igbo. You look like an Igbo." I said, "That's possible. But I also have European blood." And that is something we must be able to embrace as a people. So that little girls, because of the hue of their skin, will not be discriminated against, or because they have a little more sulfur bonds in their hair than others. That they will understand that the little girl sitting next to them, though she is a bit lighter, from the same place. We're the same people. Until we're able to do that, we will not realize our dreams fully, because we'll continue to act as a divided people. We'll continue to work together well separately. And that has never been good for full development. Such stories left untold, Mr. President, can present a hindrance to true national development of this society. I believe where culture is concerned, and this is a nexus with culture and education, when we teach our children in school, no Caribbean child should be able to pass through school hearing about the Federation and not know Mighty Sparrow's song, Federation. Any, meeny, miny, mo, and all those things we throw through the window. Let us deal with what we have produced. Because it has been found that one of the greatest teaching tools comes through rhythm and rhyme. No Caribbean child should be able to hear about reparations without being infused with the lyrics of Bob Marley's Babylon System. We've been trodden down the white press much too long. Rebel. Rebel. It is when we engage in this type of embrace of our culture, not seeing it as banjo or something of devil music, but this is what comes from our core as a Caribbean people, we'll be able to inspire our children. We'll be able to lead them to a place where they can embrace who they truly are and not try to be someone else. You know, I would like to visit Africa someday, but Africa is not my home. My ancestor Duda was expelled from Africa and denied of her birthright. She came here and probably went through some of the most harrowing experiences on the plantation, but through the grace of God, I am here. This is where my destiny is. This is the land I must build. This is the land I cling to. I'll always love Africa. I'll always love Europe. But this is home. And it is until we're able to embrace that sense of identity, that sense of belonging, we will not be able to achieve the type of national development and regional development that we hope to achieve. And why do I say that? Look around our region, Mr. President. Look at some of the shoutings that take place across the Caribbean Sea at the level of leadership. Look at how easily we are pitted against each other. So much so that the Honorable Prime Minister of Barbados had to say last year, we will not allow you to divide this region. When a few leaders were invited to a meeting in Jamaica by the then Secretary of State of the United States, Mike Pompeo, while leaving out other members of CARICOM. We have to make a decision about ourselves as a people. Because though this appropriation bill speaks to our circumstances in Barbados, we are not alone. I've heard it quoted here twice already, the words of John Donne, no man is an island entire and of itself. And within the Caribbean, we must recognize that. And we must recognize our common journey that we've taken as a people, and that our destinies are bound up with each other. Because I am the son of an Anguillan father and a Barbadian mother, and all my family are either in St. Martin, Anguilla, Antigua, somewhere down the road, and here in Barbados. I have no time for xenophobia. I don't know what it is. I've never felt it. I can only see people who shared a common journey. And so as we embark upon building back better as a people, not only in Barbados, but regionally, the call of Archbishop Oscar Romero comes to mind, for he was one who told the U.S. openly to stop interfering in this country. We must be able to speak truth to power and tell those who are seeking to divide us to stop interfering in our countries, so that we can embrace who we truly are and we can build together, not only as a nation here in Barbados, but as a region. But in order for all these things to take place, Mr. President, we must be willing to tell the untold stories. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Reverend Dr. Rogers. Senator Franklin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I was just there enjoying Senator Rogers and his talk. I was going on, because he was saying a lot of things that I like, but I have to go to church by him sometime and hear some more. That's all it would be. I remember once telling a person when he was trying to trace back my family tree, he referred me, asked me about a fellow Franklin. And I said, well, if I was climbing my family tree and I saw him on it, I would climb down and get my saw. And, so I understand what you're talking about, your roots, because I have a lot of roots in all over the place, and also then too, I'm also a regional man. My wife is St. Lucian, and I have Guyanese children. You know, so I am not xenophobic either. I don't have many phobias, fortunately or unfortunately. Anyhow, sir, what I want to talk about, sir, are these estimates. I compliment the people who prepared them for their sustainability, because I know the estimates must be done in accordance with our Constitution. You have to do them. But coming up with these estimates is no easy task because of the situation that we find ourselves, a situation that we did not put ourselves in. This is the coronavirus and COVID that has devastated the world. And Barbados has not gone unscathed. I have said, sir, I said it before, and I will say it again, and that managing Barbados in these times can prove to be a lose-lose situation for the government. Why I say this? People were saying shut the borders. Some people saying if you shut the borders, we're not going to get any activity, any economic activity and stuff. So it really would have been a balancing act. Now, if you close the borders completely and you do not allow in tourists and business people and stuff, our economy would have taken a much bigger hit. But then the balancing act came. If you allowed in people, you know, and then something happened, you're going to say, you see, she should have closed the borders, we told you so. So it was a lose-lose. If you let them in and something happens, you're in problems. If you close them and nothing happens because no activity, you're also going to be in problems. So it was not a win-win situation with the government, it was a lose-lose situation. And depending on the government's call, and I do not envy them that task. Sir, but unfortunately, sir, the government saw it, their task, not only managing the country, but it saw it as a PR, something for their public relations so they can show how good they are and stuff. And they messed up, you know. Because while there was a middle ground in between closing and opening, that middle ground was putting people in quarantine, strict quarantine, and making sure that they stayed there. And that is where the authorities in Barbados messed up. Now, we didn't have coronavirus in Barbados. All of it was imported. The first 19 cases in Barbados, as far as I know, 18 of them came through JFK, and one was the husband of a wife that came through JFK. So we could have isolated those people, quarantined them, and make sure that they didn't have. But then we allowed people to come in who had COVID, and not listening to the scientists or whatever the government said they were doing, or not listening to good advice. They allowed people out of quarantine too early. Some of them didn't go into quarantine at all.
Mr. President, on the point of order, the honourable member is misleading this honourable chamber to state that the government allowed persons to come into Barbados who had COVID and some of them were not being quarantined. Everyone who came into Barbados had to produce, when we opened the borders, a negative PCR test taken within 72 hours of coming to Barbados. If you didn't have that, or if you had one that was not validated, a PCR test was done at the airport. At that time, persons waited at the airport until the result came back. If you were positive, you were put into isolation. If you were negative, you went into quarantine. That is what happened when the borders were open. anybody, and the government allowed persons who were positive to come into Barbados and to go into quarantine. You went into isolation.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I'm sorry, Mr. President, that is what was intended. That's not what happened. We had people coming to Barbados on jets, avoiding quarantine and going straight to their villas, had parties.
Mr. President, on a point of order, if the honourable member is going to state this, he has to say, who are these people?
Yes.
Had parties at their villas, had president officers.
Mr. President.
Senator Franklin, that is a very serious assertion. You will need to substantiate it or have it withdrawn from the record.
Sir, if I call names, they can say you can't call names in here. Right? Watch. But I'm telling you, people came to Barbados on jets. And they went to the estates at Turtleback Ridge and at Sandy Lane, and they had facts. And prison officers worked at those facts, contracted the virus.
Mr. President, I too rise on a point of order.
Yes, Senator.
Mr. President, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is misleading the House. Villas were designated and inspected by the COVID inspection unit as designated quarantine facilities. If persons arrived at the airport, even on private jets, the identical procedure that was just outlined by Senator Walker applied. They were allowed to go either to hotels or to private villas for quarantine purposes. And that is allowable under the law. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I ain't interrupt nobody, you know. I sat down and listened to some things that I didn't know to be completely at variance with my knowledge. I said nothing, I wait my turn. But there's going to be a lot of getting up, so you use your spring cushion. Because I will say it again. Those, and Senator Cummings just substantiated what I said. People went to villas. Those people who went to villas.
Mr. President, the honourable member has been misleading the House and is trying to avoid it. He said earlier that the government allowed persons with COVID to come into this country and go into quarantine. I am asking him if he's saying that, he has to name the people, or else he has to withdraw. He can't just be allowed to drift away as though he never said it and try to get into some other strand and try to mix up quarantine with isolation when there are two different processes. He has to name the people or he has to withdraw the statement.
Sir,
Senator Franklin.
he can't tell me what he got to do in here. That is your job.
Senator Franklin, please. The matter of, it is a fine point, but you did say that the government allowed people with COVID to go to the villas.
Sorry?
You did say that the government allowed people with COVID to go to the villas. I'm sure that's not what you intended, but that's what I said. I asked you to withdraw
Sir,
that.
What you want me to say, the COVID unit or whatever?
No,
because
no.
that is part of government. And I'm saying, sir.
Senator Franklin, for clarity, a person coming in who needs to be tested or whatever is one thing. A person who has COVID is a specific situation. And I don't think it would be that you can say that the government the authorities allowed people with COVID to move on, because it suggests that they acted improperly, that they knew that a person was positive, and yet they moved on. I would invite you to withdraw that comment and move on with the rest of your opinions.
Sir, I never said that there are people who are positive. I said that government knew that people were positive. I never said the government that people.
It's not what you intended. It's not what you intended. It's what came out.
Sir,
So
I never
just
said.
withdraw and move on.
Sir, I never said government knew they were positive. I said they didn't isolate them or they didn't quarantine them.
No, just a second, Senator Walker and Senator Franklin. What you did say, and I'm sure it was inadvertent, but you did say that there were people with COVID that were allowed to move on to their villas. Just withdraw that from the record and move on.
Sir,
I know you're a responsible person. That's not what you meant, but that is
sir,
what will
what I'm
appear in
saying.
the record.
Sir,
if it's
if you would bear with me, then you would understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
I said people, I'm not saying the government knew. I said they had COVID or they were infected with the coronavirus. They didn't show any symptoms yet. They went to their villas.
Mr. President.
No.
Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Walker.
I need a mic.
What's your point of order?
Mr. President, the honorable member said in here that the government allowed persons with COVID to come into this country and to go all over the place and into quarantine. I'm saying that that is not true. If the honorable member knows this to be a fact, he has to state names, the people who did it. Or he has to be destroyed, Mr. President.
I have instructed that be struck from the record, and the senator will move on.
Sir, I am moving on. But I am saying,
Senator Walker.
Mr. President, I'm asking you, Mr. President, to rule. The honorable member has to withdraw that misleading statement.
I have ruled.
Mr. President,
And the honorable, I've ordered it struck from the record. Senator Franklin, you will request that as well, but in order to, whether you agree or not, it will be struck from the record because
no
it's
problem.
factually incorrect.
Sir,
But
it is not.
I know you to be a responsible person.
sir, it
That's
is
not
not.
what you.
It
That's not
has
what
been
you
struck from the
intended.
record, but it is not factually incorrect.
It is. Let us
And
let
sir,
us rest that
he
and
is
move
not the
on,
bully
please.
of the Senate. He is the leader of government business in the Senate. He can't come in here and try to bully me all the time. I have the right to speak, and if he wouldn't let me speak because he doesn't want me to say what I'm saying. I am saying, sir.
Senator Franklin.
I am saying, sir.
Senator Franklin, please. I must remind you, as you well know, that the standing orders do not permit a senator to impute improper motives
So he's
to
bullying
any
me
member.
because he don't do it to me.
And bullying is highly improper. And therefore, you cannot suggest that the honorable leader of the House is trying to bully you or any other senator. Please withdraw that and let us move
Sir,
on.
I will withdraw it without reservation. It's just that my language is so limited that I don't know what to call him other than a bully. But because that is what's happening to me. You know, so I will have to check my thesaurus and look for another word for bully, then that bully is offensive. But he doesn't want me to say that persons came into Barbados who were COVID positive. They were not, I'm now hearing that the villas were designated as quarantine facilities. I didn't know that. But for the people who went to those quarantine facilities, they were their own villas. They did not provide adequate enough security, and those people left, went out into the community. Some of them went to Old Town. Some of them had a particular taxi driver who works in the prison transporting him.
Mr. President, on a point of order, the honorable member is stating these things as being factual. People left their villas. There wasn't adequate security. I mean, where is the information, Mr. President? I could get up in here and say that in here is a church, and I'd be allowed to get away with it, Mr. President? I mean, as a senator, I mean, it's an honorable chamber, and they would expect members to come in here, and if they're going to make statements, at least they should be factual.
Mr. President, no coronavirus came to Barbados as far as Dr. Walker is concerned, or Senator Walker is concerned. None came. None came as far as he's concerned, and none got out. I am saying to you that we had a situation where there were parties among these people who came to Barbados and subsequently tested positive when they went to their own quarantine facility, and the quarantine facility should have been manned by government. That's the point I want to make. If you had a situation where you are going to quarantine people, I know different between quarantine and isolation, Senator Walker, don't worry. These people were supposed to stay at home, or to stay in their quarantine facility at home, because it was their home, because they own these massive and these beautiful villas and stuff. I don't grudge them that. They own them, and the authorities allowed them to go to their facility to quarantine. They did not follow the rules. Some of them had parties, and prison officers that I represent in some form or fashion ended up at those facilities and taking COVID into the prison. So when the government tried to put the blame of the spread on the bus crawl that happened on the 26th of December, COVID was already in the prison on the 16th. 16th of December. You can go and check your facts. So it wasn't that the bus crawl brought COVID into the prison, it was that the prison took COVID to the bus crawl and helped us spread some more. So, and we had everybody, including Senator Walker on TV, blaming the bus crawl.
Mr. President,
Yes,
I
Senator.
know you're going to get up
the
again.
honorable member is again misleading this honorable chamber. There is no record of any cases of COVID being in the Dodge prison in Barbados on the 16th of December. The first case of COVID in the Dodge prison is recorded on the 26th. Again, Mr. President, if the honorable member has this information, he has to share it, or he has to stop just pulling things out of the air.
Well, if it happened on the 26th, if the bus crawl, sir, he is misleading the House. They let him mislead.
Yeah, but
He goes on the point of order.
Let me caution you. Please, in this very important national matter, stick to the facts. And if there is no
Sir,
official record of there being COVID in the prison on December 16th, unless you're able to substantiate it, just move on, please.
Sir, they have people that buried in gullies, and there's no official record that they have died, but they're still dead. Don't let me tell you.
But Senator, it is not in your position or mine for us to state such things that we cannot substantiate in this honorable chamber. Please stick to what you can substantiate, unless you're expressing an opinion.
Sir.
But you, Senator Frank, you know the rules. Please
So I
stick
know
to
the
them
rules,
and
I
let
know
us
the
move
rules
on.
well. That is why also Senator Walker, who's been here longer than me, should know them too. He doesn't want me to speak today, so he's coming up and he's spraying up, but I want back my time. And so far, he's taken 10 minutes away from my speech. Because I got my stop clock on here.
16 minutes.
Right? He's taken 10 minutes. He's taken from my speech. Sir, Senator Walker just said that the first person tested in the prison was in the 26th. The bus crawl was in the 26th. So how could you come on the bus crawl and then infect the prison and get tested on the 26th? Tell me that. I will sit down and let you go on the point of order now. Because how on God's earth can you have a test on the 26th from the bus crawl that happened on the 26th and the person was proven positive? I will sit down and let you talk.
Mr. President.
And trouble yourself.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I said that the first case, positive case of COVID in prison was on the 26th. I never mentioned the word bus crawl. I haven't used that for the entire week that I've been here, the word bus crawl. So I don't know what point the honorable member could be making. It could
Thank you,
also,
Senator
of
Walker.
course,
Sir?
be, unless he's saying that one of the prison officers who were in the prison went on the bus crawl or had a relationship with the bus crawl and they went there. I don't know. I wouldn't be saying so.
Sir,
Thank you, Senator
If you-
Walker,
if you
for
would
that
listen,
point
you
of
would hear.
clarification.
if you would
Senator
listen,
Franklin.
you will hear. But I will tell you, sir, there were people tested for COVID before the 26th, and they didn't tell you. Because the prison was, but I can deal with the prisons right now. Right? So as I was saying, the handling of the situation, because what should have happened if you put a person in quarantine? If you put them at a hotel, the hotel security, the hotel security, sir, I want some protection from Senator Walker.
I will protect you.
Please.
I will protect you. You have my full protection, Senator Franklin. Proceed.
Or you have to get the sergeant at arms to take him out because you wouldn't allow my honorable member to speak.
I'm not hearing their sides, and neither should you.
Sir, but you're not disturbing me. If you had a quarantine facility, let's say in a hotel, and the quarantine facility, you put people in and give them that red armband, not the ones that you brought in that would have monitored them, but for the lack of the software, so you had to resort to the cloth armbands or the plastic armbands, whatever it were, and the people tore them off. At one hotel, where I have 64 members, people left their rooms, came down to the bar and were at the pool. And when the security tried to tell the people that you shouldn't be down here and stuff, because some had on their armbands and all at the bar. And when they tried to report them, management threatened the security, you know. So you should have had your own security. If a place was designated a security, a quarantine facility, the government should have said, well, if you want business, even the quarantine business, you have to subject yourselves to our security, so that you have no control over the security, because you can fire the security officers if you get your guests vexed. But if you had our police or some other person paid by the government there who didn't have to care about the hotel owners' wishes, his job was to make sure that the thing was contained, then those people would have remained in the hotel, but they left and they went on 2nd Street and they danced on top of vehicles. You know, they danced on top of vehicles. So the middle ground would have been to enforce the quarantine and make sure that the thing didn't spread. I didn't hear that, sir.
Neither did I.
Thank good. So everyone in Barbados who has coronavirus, who had that, who died from COVID-19, as a direct result of government's negligence in this area. What was that, Senator Walker? You didn't get up. I was waiting. I am saying that if government didn't drop the ball, those deaths.
Mr. President, I thought you would intervene, Mr. President, and I would not have to get up. The honorable member has just said that every person who died.
I don't know what he's on. He just got to start talking. If he's on a point of order, I will sit down.
On the point.
He's on a point of order.
Well, good. Well,
Now
I know.
The honorable member just stated, and I couldn't believe it, and I know that you didn't believe it either, that the government, through its negligence, is responsible for every single person that's died from COVID. After giving us a theory of the origin of COVID, he is coming here and trying to tell us who was patient X and how it was transmitted. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't know a single country in the world where they can identify a patient X as it relates to the COVID pandemic. But the honorable member has come to this chamber this morning, has identified that person, and has put it, in his words, that on the government being negligent. I really don't believe that the honorable member intended to say so, and I would respectfully ask that you would ask him to remove that.
Let me correct what I was saying. Every person who died after the 1st of January, when this spread happened, is directly attributable to the government's negligence. You want closer to that? Because we had 7 or so deaths before. But the people who, when the second wave hit us, this second wave hit us because we had it out there now in the communities, because the people who went to these parties with the people who were supposed to be in quarantine, that weren't properly managed in quarantine, people who left quarantine and went and do their business, they spread it. They gave it to us. We didn't have it here. It's not a homegrown thing, so it had to come in. I mean, it came in. I don't care if it was if you were patient X or patient Y. The problem is that one of those people, or that have been, I'm talking about Senator Walker. You were talking about patient X. The president doesn't get involved in the debate, but you want to get involved now.
Just adjust the chair, please, Senator Walker. Senator Franklin,
Yes,
sorry.
thank you. Yeah. So that was the thing. But that is hindsight, and no hindsight is 2020, because if government knew that this would have happened, I'm sure they would have made sure that these people stayed in quarantine. But we didn't want to offend people that had a lot of money. So the people who had a lot of money. No, I wanted them in quarantine, Senator Walker. I wanted them in quarantine. I wanted them to stay there till we were safe. So he's interrupting the house, you know.
I'm hearing
Bad behavior,
I'm hearing you
but
very clearly.
this constant murmuring, like a thing on a Spanish station, sir. You know,
He's entitled to clear his throat.
but
Please press on, Senator
so what is
Franklin.
it? This throat says he should go in the receptacle in the washroom, not in here. Right? So the point that I was making is, yes, I didn't expect that we would have been unscathed, but the level that has descended on this country was predictable, it was foreseeable, just that we dropped the ball. When I say we, I mean we, the government and its institutions. And then they sought to put it on the people. Mind you, when they had COVID cases at the National Assistance Board, they heard National Assistance Board on radio. When they had a prison, you embarrass prison officers and you talk about, you even call prison officers names on the, not you, on TV, on radio, and Facebook, and had police looking for them. But when you had a hotel, you had Hotel 1 and Hotel 2 and Restaurant 1 and Restaurant 2, but you called people's names. One fella tells me now that he, a prison officer, that he don't catch the bus that drives in his district. He's catch buses passing there and walking because the people that identified him. Yeah, that's what you people did.
Senator Franklin, let me ask you to withdraw what you said so far and rephrase. I know, I'm sure that you're not intending, but the implication of what you're saying is that the government identified people who were COVID positive. That is not what you're intending. The prison officers that were identified were asked to contact their superiors, which is, I've heard it in the case of police officers and so on, and I wouldn't want that the record reflect that inaccuracy. Please withdraw, rephrase, and move on.
Sir, I am going to say to you that I was on the telephone speaking with 3 of the persons who were identified on the TV. And the police were outside their doors saying that they had COVID. And they were hiding away from the police. The police were outside, and that's why the police didn't. The police stayed outside, and they bring people in suits to get them, because the word was spread that 3 persons. If you want me, I don't want to call the names. They went to bus crawl and they were infected and all kinds of stuff. 3 Christian young men.
And Senator Franklin, we're addressing the matter of the action of government, and obviously government is run by its ministers. You cannot impute improper motives to members of either house. And I'm simply saying to you that whatever the community may say, or anyone else other than those honorable members may say or do, I wouldn't want you to go down the road of saying that the government identified 3 prison officers or anyone, because it would mean the government and the government spokesman contravene the law. The law says you cannot identify people who are so infected. The matter of how the incident responders handle themselves, they can handle that out in the public on their own. I'm simply saying, let us keep the record of this Senate accurate and pure. So withdraw and move on.
I will attempt to do so by saying that I heard the Minister of Home Affairs with my own 2 ears on TV calling those fellas names. So if he is not a government person, and I hope that he is no longer a government person much after this week, But I will get to that.
And Senator Franklin, I made myself clear. I heard what you heard, and they were called on to report to their superiors. I have heard on other occasions police officers who needed to report and did not report, they identified and asked to report, which is an entirely different matter from implying that people were identified as being COVID positive.
Mr. President, I understand you, and I'm going to say to you that you don't have all the facts, so I will give you some. That exercise was done to embarrass those men, and nothing else, because their superiors knew exactly where they were all the time, because I told them when they were at the lab, the polyclinic, they had to be going for the test. When they got word that they were supposed to go to the prison, they were already at, what do you call it? It's the polyclinic. So the guy who was supposed to go work that night, he called at work and he said to the jury manager that he is at the Winston Scott Polyclinic waiting for a test, so he's not going to be early. When he got the test, the medical officer of health, who represents the chief medical officer, said, go home and stay there till your results came back. That was communicated to the prison authorities, and how I know that to be the case, because I was also again on a joint WhatsApp three-way call with the three of the gentlemen, and the acting assistant superintendent called on the phone. And he said, gentlemen, let me break away from this call. I can call you back, but and he called the person by name, is calling me. I said, no, put down. Put him on speaker, I want to hear. So he told him that I called in already, so they knew where it was. And he said, but you got to come to, he said, but the medical officer of health tell me don't leave home. He said, well, if I want me to leave home, you can provide transportation, because I'm not supposed to go on the bus, because I don't have any vehicle. I heard all of that on the phone. And the man said, get here how you can. The super said, get here by 2 o'clock or else. His words, not mine. And when that happened, he said, but I can't come. I can't, the doctor tell me don't, I could be arrested. They knew where the persons were. He said, that or else means I'm going to embarrass you publicly if you don't come into prison. You want to know, and you know why they want them in prison? 3 of those persons have lawsuits against the government and the superintendent of prisons, and they wanted them in the prison to shut down. I said to them, look, I know it's an offense to tell you not to go to work, but I'm going to tell you, them people want to do you harm. Do not go up there. Because if you go up there, they're going to lock the prison behind you and you're not going to get out. Sir, and that's exactly what happened. Men turn up at prison. You know, these people up there decided they don't want results. They don't want results from a test that was done in the polyclinic. They want results that were from the test that was done at the prison. So they're going to come up there. Even though they had tests done before the other prison officers, you know. 12 hours before the other prison officers, tell them to come up here. Because they wanted to lock them up inside there. And their cases would have gone. And they had wise counsel, me. I said to them, you are following the law. Nobody in the prison can overrule a person representing the chief medical officer, not even prime minister, in this crisis. So no authority in the prison can tell you, disobey the medical officer of health and turn up there. So don't go. And they put their names on the radio and TV, and I heard the minister with my own 2 ears calling the names. And said they didn't know where they were. They knew where they were because the man called him on his landline. You know what, with a landline in your pocket? And I overheard the conversation. I was on my bed. I didn't travel that much. I was laying down on my bed and I was using my WhatsApp phone. The same phone that I tell me when you got all the interruptions that you gave me. Yes, I had no choice. Me, the wife, and Snow. We were quarantined. And those gentlemen suffered humiliation and embarrassment, all because of machinations, you don't want to use it, I use it, of certain people in authority in Barbados. And I'm not talking about political people now. I said, don't go. They're going to lock you up inside there. And you know my words came true. When that incident happened, the people who were called and said, come to the prison and get tested. No, you live in St. Lucie, and you can't stop at any polyclinic to get tested. No, you got to come to the prison. But that had a particular motive, to get those fellas in there and then lock the door. Men turned up in short pants and a shirt. And then they couldn't leave. They locked the prison door, has defense force soldiers on the outside, the man can get out with guns. And the superintendent of prison got a vehicle and left the prison. He ain't stopping with them. He and some chosen few. Some chosen few that do not do any work in the prison. There are prison officers right now that he pulled away from the prison, who have never ever came into contact with the prisoner. They brought them there, nice little fingernails and Q-tips and things, and looking nice, and they work in the office and doing no prison work, none. As a matter of fact, they're doing work in the prison that don't exist for a prison officer. Nothing their job is, nothing that they do is prison work. No. Some of them went home. Some of them work from home. I don't know who you could get a prisoner from home, but some of them work from home during this crisis. All right? All of this happened. You have, if they know their civilian staff and their prison staff. They've taken some of these
Mr. President?
beautiful people.
I want you to rise, Senator Cummings.
I rise on a point of relevance, Mr. President. While this may be...
That is not a point, sir. Let me continue.
I'm
Sir, that is not a point of
President
anything.
of the Senate. Perhaps he could rule and not
Sir,
Senator
but
Franklin.
sir, no, if there's a point of order, I would say, but that is a point of nonsense.
The President has to rule, Senator Franklin, not you.
No, she
can't
never
bully
said
it.
that.
You can't bully the Senate, Senator Franklin.
Senator Cummings. So I'm giving the senator latitude. I'm fully aware of the Standing Order 35 in terms of scope of debate, but in an appropriation bill, where all heads are, and we don't break into committee, all heads can be considered, policy, programs, all together. There's a lot more latitude in an appropriation bill than there may be otherwise. So I'm giving Senator the latitude to speak on the Attorney General, on the Ministry of Home Affairs, prison subhead, COVID, all matters on which she may choose to speak in this debate. Senator Franklin, you have the floor.
Sir, thank you, sir. Because I'm going to bring it all into line with the amount of money they're paying it, they're giving the prison, to run the prison and waste it there. Because, sir, all the, what she's done now, she's just opened up a can of worms, you know, because I'm going to come right down to the point where the prison, maybe my dear Senator Cummings, you will obviously my dear Senator Cummings. What they have done, they are wasting the money at prison. Yeah, we want to talk money, we talk money. In the prison, we have people in the prison who are doing non-prison officer work and getting paid for it. You see, that's where the money comes. They are not employed doing prison duties. They have other duties that I will not speak about today because you don't want me to get into this carnal nonsense, but I'm not going to that with you today. I'm not getting into that with you today. Very sorry. You know what I'm talking about. I'm going to raise the bet higher than you want me to bring it. All right? So, the prisoners are not getting the necessary diet. We've had scurvy in prison, you know. We've had scurvy in prison. And all you could do to prevent scurvy is give fella, you know, the old sailor do it, squeeze the line a little bit and the man would be healthy the next day. People had scurvy with the teeth falling out in prison again. Like, this is what you know that is cruel and inhuman punishment? Not to feed a man so that the teeth start dropping out. I'm not even going to talk about the scabies because they clean the place properly and that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk about people not getting the quantity. Mind you, I have I have had reports, and the thing is, all of a sudden, everybody's calling me, telling me about what's happening to their people and all that kind of stuff. One of the prison officers that was in contact with me through a third party, through whatever party it is, when they find out that he was there to beat the living daylights out of him, I was going to use another word, and lock him up in quarantine. But then, of course, no, I have one contact in the prison. So another prisoner let me know what was happening, and they called the minister. When he found out what happened, the guy was taken out of segregation, because you don't put the boy in segregation 1 day or half a day. Man get beat because I find out things I find out really that tell me that they brought body bags into the prison and then bring a sanitizer on a soap when they were locking down the prison. So when they told me about this thing, I start making noise about it, and the fella get beat bad. He need a swell as big my head, and the lock him away, and nobody can see him. All right? 2 burly prison officers licked the daylights out of him because I was told about the conditions inside the prison, and I talked about them. So I'm talking about men went into the prison, having been told to come for a test under a pretext, and they were enslaved in the prison because they were put to work against their will. They were put to work on 12-hour shifts, 12 hours on and 12 hours off on the floor. Men slept on the floor because there was no preparation for them. Men didn't have any exchange of clothes. They worked in their own clothes, some of them in short pants, because they were fearful that if the prison officers knew that was COVID in the prison, they wouldn't allow them back, they wouldn't come back to work. So they locked them up. You imprison them and you enslave them. And enslaved is the only word I will use.
Senator Franklin, slavery is against is a criminal act in Barbados. You really cannot use such language in this debate. I've given you latitude. You spent 40 minutes of your 1 hour on this one matter, and to which you are entitled, but you really cannot accuse the authorities of enslaving anyone without coming with absolute proof. And in fact, that such matter should be drawn to the attention of the Royal Barbados Police Force. Please withdraw that and move on. If you feel the need to pursue that matter, pursue it elsewhere, but not in this debate as the first point. Just remove that. We have that reference to enslavement struck from the record, and move on from there, please.
Sir, I'm not going to say enslaved because it seems to be offending you, and I don't like to offend you. You know that.
It's against the law.
But, sir, the law did go against the law. We had prison officers having their way with prisoners, so that's against the law too. And the thing is, the authorities know.
Senator Franklin, I will withdraw that. Raise those matters in another place at another time. To read them into Hansard imputes a level, infers a level of factuality that we cannot necessarily test. You're free to express opinions, but opinions should stand on their own legs, wearing their own clothes. When they are clothed as fact, and think that unintentionally you may very well not just mislead the public now, but for the benefit of people reading this debate as historians 100 years from now. It will be taken that the goodly, honorable, distinguished Senator Franklin spoke these words, and therefore they're factual. So please, be more responsible,
sir,
in prosecuting the matter that you're prosecuting.
Sir, I use the word enslaved, and if you don't like it, I'll withdraw it. But I will tell you what happened.
Yes. But I'm also saying this matter of people having their way with people and so on.
Sir,
let it withdraw that and let us move on, please.
Sir, whatever you say, but I will tell you what I know happened. Prison officers went to prison to get a COVID test. The doors were locked behind them. They were put to work. They were put to work without pay because after the 8 hours, they get a pay overtime. They worked 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and they slept on the floor. And all fairness, I must say that when they drew it to the Prime Minister's attention, they got caught the same day. All right? When I heard it, I sent a message to the Prime Minister, and later on that day, cots were provided. But that was a couple of days into the lockdown when the people were on the floors and sleeping in their cars. They had 8 beds for women, and one was supposed to get out of bed and go and work, and let them get in. And we objected to that because if you're trying to protect people from COVID, you've got to provide separate beds. You can't in one bed sleeping, and then get out and somebody hopping. So, and the Prime Minister fixed that. So I will give you credit that it happened. She didn't know about it before. When it was brought to her attention, she moved with alacrity, and it was fixed. But these men were brought to work and made to work against their will and without pay. Because all right now, and I'm talking about, I see nothing in the estimates that can provide for the money for them who work for that, but it got to be a whole month now because there were 2 weeks in quarantine, then that you can tell. And if you were on the duty, you're never allowed to leave duty, you got to pay them for that. So you see, I coming home to estimate some money. Those officers, and when I said enslave, I use the word enslave, probably ill-advisedly, but when you force people to work without payment and against their will, there's a certain definition for that. I'm not going to call it, but people will draw their own conclusions. Right? So I don't want, sir, I got. No. You spoke 15 minutes.
You have 15 minutes more.
And I have 41 minutes according to my clock when I started. I 41 and 28 seconds now. Because I timing. Because I figured out what they're going to try to stop me. And 20 minutes were taken up of yours. Right? But anyhow, sir, I want to get away now from the president and I want to talk about the government industrial school. And the first thing I will say, sir, is that I've been involved at the government industrial schools for many years. Not unlike some of us in here who were students. I was an industrial relations officer. I don't call your name, Brad Sandoval. I won't do that to you. I don't call Jerome's name. I was involved at the level of industrial relations officer in UPW back in the 80s.
Senator Franklin, I know the spirit in which you made your comment, a moment of levity. But again, just for the purity of the record, I would want you to withdraw that because we know the CVs of all the honorable members. Not there's anything wrong with being students of the government industrial school, but we know. And you know, and we know it was said in a moment of levity, but for the purity of the record, going forward 100 years hence, you withdraw and we'll strike that from the record. There were no persons present here who were students at the government industrial schools, and let us move on.
Sir, I was involved for a number of years, and in both units of the government industrial school, the girls and the boys, there's always a crying need for investigation of what transpired in these places. Mind you, these are supposed to be reform schools. They call them schools. And they don't teach them anything. That is nothing worthwhile. Just recently, December to be exact, in December 12th, a lady from the prison came to my office because she was informed that her contract would be terminated. And the reason why it was going to be terminated is that she complained to the actual offenders what they did to a child was wrong. They beat the child, they stepped on her stomach, held her down with a foot on her stomach. This is not the one that the people talk about now. This is another one. And they beat her to a pulp. She went to the person's door and she told them, look, what you do is wrong. And the woman, and they said to her, I know you have good intentions for the girls, but keep your mouth shut, or you will never work in the public service again. But she went home on the 31st of December and she never went back. I know that to be the case because I helped her to draft the letter to the Director General, where these allegations of abuse of little children were made, and nothing happened officially about it. She is saying, I witnessed a child being stepped on, held down by a person's foot, a very senior person at that. I'm not going to call any names, because I can provide you with the record. And no, not Documentary House. And that child, she told me something that really amazed me and had me scared. I asked her why she came to me, and she told me, the United Nations advocate, children's advocate, sent her to me to get help. And I'm saying, well, if you're not getting protection for the children at that level, yeah, send her to me, because she complained to her, and she said, go and talk to her as well. That lady still don't even work. And all she did was to go to the people and say, you should get the child. The child that was beaten mercilessly, absconded thereafter. I don't think they'll find her yet. But it goes on. Because several years ago, a young lady made some allegations that she was sexually assaulted by one of the attendants there. She was arrested. They searched her home, looking for the implements that she claimed to use on them, and she was suspended from the public service. When the young lady was released from custody, she confessed to her father that the letter that she wrote making these allegations about the young lady was untrue, they were untrue, but she had to write it because they told her that if she don't write it, she soon will be released and they will send her to the big prison and not let her go home. So she wrote exactly what they told her to write. When that information was given to the police, the lady charges were dropped, she was allowed to return to work, and none of the people who did these awful things got any sort of punishment, nothing. That young lady is now seeing a psychiatrist because of what she went through. And when she came back to work, one of the young students said to her, by name, do not come work at night because they tell me that we used to beat you. And if you can't work, I can go beat you. I like you, but I go beat you because if I don't beat you, they're going to beat me. So she does not go to work at night when a certain person is on duty because they will gang up on her and beat her. This is happening to the certain knowledge of the last minister and the one before that. I know this one. And nothing is happening in this school. And children are being taken down there and physically, mentally abused. And the money that we are spending on them down there don't go to help reform them because some of them have gotten some little minor things with the law. Some of them get locked up for something as simple as wandering, because I know of one instance where a young lady got raped, and a very nice little girl, she got raped, but then it's so traumatic, and she was walking. They found her walking, took her before the court for wandering, and locked her up. Nobody tried to find out why she was wandering. And what happened to her? She ended up at the Defense Force when they moved Somerville, and then, you remember the event there? And she was beaten and abused and all kinds of stuff up there. These things were going on for years, and nobody has done anything about it. I am calling on the government to move the entire leadership of the government industrial school and institute an investigation into the abuses that we have there going on. And this is only because the last one got a lot of highlight. This is not a one-off situation. This is the one that got the public's attention, but there are many. It hurts me when I have to hear these things because I have children. I have grandchildren. 5 grandchildren, by the way, sir.
Well done.
And it hurts me. Mind you, that my grandchildren, I am trying to make sure that they have the kind of training and stuff that they would avoid these places, but you never know. Because they might be on the road walking, they might call them wandering. Somebody want to get now to Employment Rights Tribunal, Labor Department, Ministry of Labor. And Brother Senator Walker, be prepared to stand up again because I am going to say some things that might offend you. Government does not care about the workers of this country. They care only about capital. And I've seen it so because right now, you put a measly $403,597 in the estimates for the Employment Rights Tribunal. Now let me tell you what happened. Here's 126, look at that. Somewhere around there. The Employment Rights Tribunal has no home. It's a wandering group. And I can give you my own experience there. I am representing a worker who has been, to my mind, unfairly dismissed. The company gets a lawyer. So we have a date before the tribunal. Then the lawyer hears from the court the day before, the judge wants to see you in court tomorrow morning. High Court takes precedence of any tribunal. So you have to make an excuse at the tribunal and go to court. So we don't get, so meeting adjourned because we don't have, that side doesn't have their lawyer. So the next time now, we have to meet again. The lawyer is available, I'm available, the tribunal is ready to work, but then there's no space for the tribunal to sit down and have a meeting. Because the room that they have the meeting in was booked for something else. So we can't meet. So government should be looking for space, a home for the tribunal. But we have people of the caliber of former Justice Blackman, who's willing to sit and render judgment for the measly money that they pay him. And when you've got that kind of talent, you don't frustrate it. You know? We got John Williams, who's one of the civilian people who I know well, you know well, sir. He's one of the non-legal people on the tribunal that they have to give up their time, and they don't really get paid for it. And then, sir, the tribunal has 9 members. 3 lawyers and then 6 non-lawyers. So each lawyer chairs a panel of 3, right? There are 3 panels who can sit and hear half cases. But what happens? The tribunal has 1 secretary and 1 transcription person. Mind you, sir, the secretary and the transcription person is one and the same. So if you're going to have a meeting of you can only have 1 panel meeting at any one time. So you have people out there, cases can be heard, panels ready, willing, and able to work, but can't work because 1 of them ain't got no space to sit down, and 2, they only got 1 transcription person for 3 panels. Government needs to put some money into labor to make sure that the rights of the worker are protected, and when the rights are not, when they're not protected, or when they don't, or when the people run afoul of them, that people get justice. I have a case going on now. 7 years. A person dismissed from BW unfairly. And I can't get a hearing. Because every time something happens, the lawyer is not available for something. 7 years. He's waiting for his day before the tribunal. 7. That's one, the older one, not the oldest one. Something got to give. But before a matter can go before the tribunal, it has to pass through the Labor Department. There is a conciliation process where the Chief Labor Officer is required to see if he can settle the matter without having to go before the tribunal. If that fails, then the Chief Labor Officer would refer it to the tribunal. You can't get to the tribunal but through the Chief Labor Officer. But there are not enough labor officers. And the space that they sit in is about the space that Santa Gwen is occupying now. They cannot social distance inside there. It's impossible. So they got to work from home now. So the Labor Department needs a home. The tribunal needs a home. Because they are all squatting in the Bark building at Warren, or the Warren office complex, mind you. I keep calling it that so much. And they are cramped for space. And you know what is amazing? Is that the Labor Department, if there were called in at a private sector place, and the workers were in such cramped conditions, it would take steps to either shut them down or make them do something about it. But government offices and government officers have to work in those conditions, and the people who are supposed to enforce those conditions are working in them and saying nothing. And people talk about civil servants. Civil servants work in some awful conditions. I'm glad I heard they're going to be refurbishing a lot of places now and making room for them, because let me tell you something, it is not easy. I know COVID has made it. Look, just recently, and we had a situation where the Prime Minister of all people said, if you can work from home, work from home. And she gave that directive. And we had heads of department that say, no, you got to come work. And that led to a walkout. And the Prime Minister did nothing about it because somebody countermands the Prime Minister's order, something should happen. But the man got no head of department that got more power than the Prime Minister. And when the lady said to the head of the department, ma'am, I have a child that should be going to the day nursery, but the day nurseries are closed. And the response was, I'm not responsible for your child care issues. This is a lady, head of the department, that said that. I'm not going to go on to the rest of the conversation. No, right? So we need...
Please wind up, Senator Franklin. I'll give you a few minutes to wind up.
So he take about 15 of my minutes.
No, there was active exchange in accordance with the rules.
No, so there was no active exchange. I was once a bullying, but then maybe I can't say that. So I want to get to the question of some things that Senator Walker said when he was delivering his opening remarks. He talked about things that the government did to facilitate workers, like the BEST program, where the government told the employers, well, they don't send home the people, we will help you with the financing and stuff, and you got to do under certain conditions. But one of those conditions was that you would pay 80% of the wages of the worker. The worker would get 80%. That is against the law. That is dismissal. Unless the worker agreed to it, you can't cut the salary. But government made a proposal to cut people's salaries. And you know what's amazing? In that the Barbados Labour Party were in opposition, went to Parliament to say that you can't cut civil servant salaries. But now the Barbados Labour Party government is giving employers in the private sector permission or telling them to cut the salaries. That is one thing I heard Senator Walker talk about, that he wanted to talk about. But there are a lot of things that happen in this country with respect to workers that is troublesome. Because some of these hotels now, and I know they don't have a lot of business and stuff, but you have monthly paid workers. And you have daily paid workers and weekly paid workers and stuff. But they are treating the monthly paid workers like hourly paid workers and letting them come work for 3 days a month and paying them for only 3 days. If you have a monthly contract, you can only be paid for a month. If you are ready, willing, and able to work, the employer, after the employer don't provide work for you, he will pay you for the time. But no, and this is allowed. And it's happening. I'm not hearing anybody in this who used to be in this place or the other, who's in the other one saying that these things are wrong and that you can't do it. We hearing some people talking about it's a good program, that kind of thing. The program can only be good if it treats people fairly. And it is not treating people fairly. Right? So I want the government to do a comprehensive relook at the labor laws of Barbados. A lot of things, and I'm not talking about the Employment Rights Act that the Ministry of Labor and the Labor Department and Minister are talking about changing certain things. They are changing certain things that the employers find offensive because they don't want to pay a certain amount of money. They want to treat people badly. Years ago, employers, before they had the Employment Rights Act, would put people to work for them and then fire them at 23 months. because after you only get severance after 24 months. So 23 months and 3 weeks, they fire you. No severance pay. In comes the Employment Rights Act and say, after working for a year, there's going to be some sort of compensation. And even if you had a contract, a short-term contract, if it was a short-term contract, if they come in succession, it is still deemed to be continuous with a certain time. What they're asking now is for government to change these things. They're asking government to change the law to benefit the workers, and they are not doing anything. The government is not doing anything to benefit the workers. They cut their salaries, you change the severance pay, and a lot of these people know when you have lost their severance pay because of government's action in here. When I warned you that these things will happen. So a lot of people know the 6 months have passed, and people are laying you off now because, if you lay them off for the 22 weeks, you had to keep them on for at least 6 months before you could, and if you lay them off, but another 6 months you had to pay severance. So they wait till after the 6 months pass and they're laying off now. This is what the government has done to workers in this country, taken advantage of them at the behest of the employers because they don't matter until an election. Mr. President, I am grateful to you. I realize it went on for 5 extra minutes.
Yes, I allowed you to wind up gracefully.
Yes, sir, and so I am very grateful to you for allowing me, and I'm not grateful to Senator Walker, who kept interrupting on points of whatever it was. But I thank you, sir, and I rest assured that if there are things that you found to be objectionable, I can provide evidence for everything that I have. But sometimes you don't need to bring out people's names and documents, but I will give you, because I have enough respect for you that it will not put you in a position where you would, where people could accuse you of anything or any favoritism toward me or anything like that. I can provide you with the information, and I will. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Franklin. Senator Walcott.
But you're supposed to get up. You won't get up.
Mr. President, I have my say.
Yes. Move the German. The break. Yeah.
Do one more.
Okay. No problem. Sure. Senator Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon to my colleagues in this honorable house and to the people of Barbados and those yonder who are listening. Mr. President, I rise to join the debate with a little less gusto than what just preceded. But I wish, Mr. President, to make an announcement in this house that I have actually determined my constituency, sir. And I wish to announce that my constituency is the silent, judgmental majority of Barbadian citizens who sit and listen to the debate and wonder why. They don't have a voice. So let's see if we can incorporate one which takes both sides, Mr. President, and seeks to forge a discussion that lends itself to education and information and progress, Mr. President. That is my constituency, sir, and they are for whom I will speak this afternoon. Now, Mr. President, my first concept was that there was a certain amount of reticence to join the fray. Believe it or not. And the reason for that, Mr. President, is that
Why speak on finances? This relates to a matter of policy. Policy is set by the government. The people have chosen their government. Why speak on it? However, sir, when contemplating that and looking at the bases on which the appropriation bill is set forward, I recognize, sir, that it comes from the Constitution. And we have had some debates, sir, before your time inside these halls, not these physically, but these spiritually, sir. These halls in which the Constitution debates tend to garner a certain amount of enthusiasm. Certainly for my part, as we recognize that this document, some say is just words. However, those of us who are educated in terms of its importance, and those who battled, because it was a battle to get it where it was, its purpose, Mr. President. And pursuant to this document, Section 109 says that we have to have a debate about the allocation of these sums. Recognizing, sir, that the budget presents the forecast, but the process that we do deals with how that subsequent, or some will say precedent, depending on whether you're a macro fiscalist, sir, in terms of your view as to what is to be done. And I know, Mr. President, this is your area, given your background and, of course, your history. So if I dwell and step a little asunder, please gently prod me back on the path. Long story short, sir, the Constitution says we have a debate. And I recognize, sir, in my musings that the reason for this debate is it's less an acceptance, sir, that this is the way it is, these are the finances, this is how it's going to be allocated. But it actually calls for and suggests and encourages a dialogue as to why you're seeking what you're seeking. And it actually calls and it invites a review of the policy. So I was then somewhat enthused, Mr. President, and given a bit more vigor to my task, having been reckoned and seeing what it can hopefully produce. And I believe, sir, that for us to start this exercise, the first thing we have to consider, and I'm going to link it all back, Mr. President, certainly to the estimates that we're dealing with, the first thing we have to consider when we're talking about any policy is how we are faring as a people. And why how we are faring as a people is important, sir, is now we get into the realm of accessibility bias and acceptance of public to your policy. You have to be cognizant that any policy that is introduced without the encouragement and involvement of the public will be rejected. So let's start with where we are, sir. The fact is, we can all accept that individuals are concerned about job security, concerned about providing for our families, concerned about impact of COVID of health. There are the mental stressors, there are the education issues with the children, virtual learning, and I believe many senators have spoken about, we have all gotten a greater appreciation for teachers during this period, sir. These are these are the factors that the individual Barbadians are feeling, sir, and I'm drawing that reference from various mental health studies and professionals, sir. Businesses are dealing with the fact that they have to contemplate what comes next. They're dealing, those who make the effort to keep their staff on. You're dealing with increased supply costs. You're dealing with increased account receivables, sir. And you're dealing with an exhausted and COVID-weary workforce. And as was said by the minister in the other place, a tense labor climate, sir. So when we recognize these are the factors, we as a nation look to the government for the relief. So the relief which we see set out in the estimates has to tie back, sir, to that policy. The fiscal situation is well documented. And the message that has been received is that we are cognizant that there is now more fiscal borrowing space. So when we look to the government for the relief and we examine the estimates, we say this is the policy. And what I propose to do, Mr. President, is to gently seek to examine the same and then to ask certain questions which would then encourage what I see as useful dialogue for the government to educate the public, which I'm sure they will be doing, and therefore get the public to buy in, and therefore, sir, my humble attempt to increase the uptake of any policy which is to be implemented. So I'm giving you a preview of where I'm going, sir. Sir, while recognizing that there is fiscal borrowing space, the information presented by the central bank is that revenue is down by 12%. The information that's also provided, sir, and I'm referring to the central bank report of 2020, is that between the period of 2018 to 2020, and I believe Senator Drakes would have spoken on this before, you've had borrowings of $350 million in 2018, sir, $150 million in 2019, sir, and $968 million in 2020, sir. These are labeled as policy loans. These policy-based loans, sir, when attributed to our GDP, and again, sir, this is me treading carefully in my area where I don't know too much, but it says here, and I'm drawing these reports from the central bank report, sir, of 2020, the debt ratio now moves in terms of debt to GDP ratio in the range of 133.6 to 146, and is projected to come down hopefully in 2021 to 2022 of 124.2 to 135.3, putting us hopefully back in a position in 2018 post adjustment, sir. So we're looking at an interim increase in GDP to debt ratio, utilization of that fiscal space that was obtained through the restructuring in 2018 is now being utilized for the purpose of these loans, sir. These policy loans, sir, point to $1.5 billion, sir. And a review of the IMF last report for Barbados indicates that fiscal rule comes into play at the end of September 2021. When I go to Google what fiscal rule coming into play means in 2021, sir, it means that it imposes a long-lasting constraint on fiscal policy through numerical limits on budgetary aggregates. Again, not my area, sir, but I believe that means limit on future government spending. If this is what the IMF is saying will come into play in September 2021, sir, and this is taken from the IMF last report that was done, sir, in December 2020 and is on their website available for review. The understanding, some will say, fun aside, is to lick it out while we can. I certainly will be asking the government to speak to the policy and how we are going to maneuver going forward if there will be this limit which comes into play in September 2021, sir. Again, remember the premise of my discussion. We have a policy. We want the policy to be accepted for us to deal with the availability bias of persons hearing $1.4 billion in policy loans. How is it that we're going to make sure that whatever we do is successful and taken on board by the public of Barbados, Mr. President? So, sir, recognizing this is the reality in which the government finds itself, and we as a Barbados populace find ourselves, we have to ask the question, what now? The fact is, sir, the World Bank predicted this in its report in 2020. We're anticipating post-COVID the following events. Fallout in tourism. Unfortunately, that has happened. Spending overruns, necessary to keep your country's socio and economic fabric solid. Reduction in revenue collection, indicated 12% reduction as said by the central bank. Fortunately, sir, we have dodged the 2020 hurricane season and hope that this luck continues, sir, in 2021. So, these, and I wanted to paint, sir, a picture of the landscape. that is the landscape that we find ourselves with in the country as of March 2021, Mr. President. It is a very daunting landscape, and the aim of the policy, I would assume, is to get us through this period. So let's see how that works, sir. The government seems to be embarked on a counter-cyclical fiscal policy. Had to look that up, Mr. President. And what that, according to the experts, say is that you increase spending during these down times, you reduce your tax increases, and I believe that that was stated by the Prime Minister, that there are no tax increases. And the hope and the data, and this is coming from the ADB working paper, sir, suggests that this results in a multiplier effect on your local GDP. So in other words, sir, you do a certain amount of spending, which then impacts your GDP, hopefully by a multiplier of the amount you have spent. What is interesting, sir, is that the experts have a debate, as we see in Jamaica, as to whether you should be counter-cyclical or pro-cyclical. That is outside my ambit, Mr. President, but I think it's useful for the public to understand that the government is utilizing a counter-cyclical fiscal policy with the aim of stimulating the GDP. I think that's a simple way of describing it and reflects the aim and hope of the government. Now, sir, you would have heard me speak to the issue of policy and uptake and public perception. And in determining, sir, the nature of this counter-cyclical fiscal policy, we must always be cautious, because we recognize, sir, that experts and policymakers, here's the rub, Mr. President. Experts and policymakers must never be too insulated from public sentiment, or else the policies are going to be rejected. Let me say that again. Experts, policymakers must never be too insulated from public sentiment, or else the policies will be rejected. Now, there's another school of thought, sir, that the experts should be so isolated so as not to be impacted by any bias. Like everything else, sir, I believe that is a combination of the two. If we want the uptake of the Barbadian public, we need to ensure that the policies are policies which they are educated about and are willing to buy in to ensure their success, Mr. President. Having identified it as counter-cyclical, sir, and my suggestion or my understanding of that being that you have a multiplier effect, we then see how that is proposed to move forward. To this end, sir, we have seen the rollout of extensive public works as laid out by the minister in the lower house, sir, or the other place. And we have seen private sector support as laid out by our own honorable member, Minister of Tourism, Senator Cummings, in relation to the tourism industry and the support, sir. We have also heard Leader of Government Business, Senator Walcott, Minister of Foreign Affairs, sir, the Honorable, speak in relation to the plans for the hotel developments, which are earmarked, as well as the waterfront and the marina, I believe, sir, and I stand to be corrected. So what we see here, sir, is extensive public work programs, and we have seen the reference to private sector support in relation to the tourist industry being spoken about in relation to the BEST program, sir. At this point, sir, I wish to segue and draw attention to recent comments by President Warren Smith of the CDB, sir, who calls for a bigger role for private sector in stimulating economic growth. In so doing, he has called for incentives to businesses in the private sector, specifically the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, who indeed, sir, when I was painting the landscape with my very broad brush, may find themselves under pressure. The CDB president also calls for building of buffers, and of course the ultimate goal of diversification of economies to reduce high vulnerabilities to external shocks, as we have seen in relation to our dependence on tourism. And I know the government has spoke about how they plan to pivot out of that position. But what I want to spend some time, sir, is the proposal in relation to increased private sector support. And I will be encouraging and looking forward to receiving a response from the government side to speak to articulating this increased private sector support. I will be setting out my understanding as to where it is and perhaps offering some proposals, Mr. President, to see how that fits in with the policy and if it were to be considered at the appropriate levels. Remember, sir, the silent, judgmental Barbadian majority, sir, by self-proclaimed constituents, Mr. President. So, sir, private sector support in relation to tourism, as I indicated, was laid out by the Minister of Tourism and by various ministers, including the Prime Minister in the lower house, sir. And I have just spoken to the Capital Works program, which was again highlighted by Leader of Government Business, Senator Walker. However, sir, I would like to hear more, and I've noted my speaking position, so this then allows the relevant government senators to address the point, sir, about the proposed support for the finance and other services which contribute some 38% of our GDP. Those finance and other services, Mr. President, I know you are familiar with, sir. And when looking at the ADP Institute working paper of 2011, recognize that while infrastructure programs are a big ticket item, past global recessions show that infrastructure works alone do not provide the solution. So I want to hear, and I'm sure I will hear, while we've heard about the infrastructure, let's hear about our 38% in terms of finance and other services. I believe in a former existence, sir, you played a very pivotal role in that industry, Mr. President. Now, so far, I recall, and I've referenced the KPMG website, sir, in terms of government incentives. These were the incentives rolled out, sir. I believe they were referenced and detailed in a document dated November 2020, sir. We have the Jobs, Investment and Business Survival, JIBS I call it, sir, Council, and the allocation of $108 million in this regard. I would like, sir, on behalf of this judgmental silent majority, if there could be some indication as to how that process is going and access to these funds and proposed upskilling. This is the aim, sir, which is to provide funds for proposed upskilling and resources for these organizations in the private sector. So I would like to hear, Mr. President, if at all possible, how our finance and other services can be looking, or whether they have started the ability to access this $108 million, sir. To this end, the needs which would seem to be most pressing, again, we've spoken about the current situation. Fund access for these times, recognizing the economic constraints, recognizing the government's intention to do infrastructure works, recognizing that the government has indicated that it has to take care of the most vulnerable. Sir, access to technological and digital aid to take advantage of the digital jump. Mr. President, I have not set foot in a courtroom for over a year and have managed to successfully conduct my courtroom practice. There has been a digital jump in terms of payments, in terms of interactions, and the last time we were here, we passed another tool to allow the further development and increase in that position, sir. So in my mind, sir, if we have the fund allocated, how do we get the relevant private sector enterprises to access training or funding to take advantage of this digital upswing, sir? Could it be, sir, Mr. President, that there's consideration of further guarantees from central banks or other government entities to back this business development. I know there's some in the works. I would like to hear the government speakers drill down on the issue in relation to finance services and others representing that 38% of our GDP, sir. But also, frankly speaking, sir, there is the issue in terms of the funding for the small wages business fund. And sir, you will recall that was a $10 million $10 million fund which could have been accessed once you have met certain criteria. In my mind, Mr. President, and perhaps it's somewhat idealistic, dare I say, if you have retained as a business your staff for the course of 2020, if you have paid your taxes, Mr. President, if you have paid your NIS contribution, Mr. President, if you have done your VAT filings, Mr. President, and paid your VAT, if you have done your corporate filings, sir, you should be given access to funding, almost as a reward. And I'm not saying, sir, to congratulate a fish for swimming. I am saying that having recognized the landscape which the country finds itself, if private sector entities have made the sacrifice, if they have, dare I say, stayed the course, perhaps they should be expedited. And this is what I would like to hear as to how that 38% could be augmented and rewarded and encouraged to develop in keeping the faith. And why I say that, Mr. President, is that in my mind, and I will let the policy determinators deal with that, encourages uptake. It says if you have done what you were supposed to do, you will be encouraged to continue to do so. The question is, Mr. President, are those who are currently benefiting kept the faith? It is a difficult road which the government has to negotiate. And my job, I believe, sir, it is to highlight areas and to encourage discourse. And I look forward to hearing the response specifically in relation, again, to that 38% of GDP, financial services, and others, Mr. President. Now look, Mr. President, one thing can be said. No one can say that this government is not doing something about the situation. And I want to be on record for noting that. My concern is that given the public availability bias, we, sir, what is, that's why social media is so powerful. We hear 1.5x amount in loans were lost. Given that bias, given that natural instinct that we all have as people, we need to be educated as to the rationale and purpose of that $1.4 billion that was borrowed, which we have to pay back, sir, which our children have to pay back, sir. And for the simple reason, as I would have laid out, sir, that any economic policy that is insulated from the emotions of the public will result in policies that will be rejected. That's the simple fact of it. So I want to hear, and I look forward to hearing the government members set out how this will be done, the educational campaigns, and how we will have the uptake as we ride off into the sunset, Mr. President. I am confident that this would be done. I look forward to hearing this, and we need to put literally our shoulders to the plow as we move forward. I thank you for this opportunity, Mr. President. I am grateful to be here, and I look forward to the continuation of this debate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Boyce.
Mr. President, I beg that to move that this sitting be now suspended until 2:45.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:45 p.m. today. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Accordingly, this methinks the ayes have it. Accordingly, this sitting is suspended until 2:45 p.m.